morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. Reminding you folks, my journey, most of you know it, 20 years ago with my wife and two small children, began caring for all four of our parents. That lasted 14 years. Started this podcast about 2 years ago, wanted to keep on doing all the education I was doing across the country in a little different way. And then we launched in January of this year our national foundation, A Plan to Age. I am now the CEO of that organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that through the podcast as well. But we have a special guest this morning. I want to introduce her. Her name is Sheila Buswell. She is the CEO and co-founder of Buswell Biomedical, a group that focuses on achieving physical mobility through technology. In 1997, she joined the Army, and in 1998, a generator fell on her foot while she was in Bosnia. 20 years later, her mom fell, broke her hip, and she saw her mom battling the same problems that she was, and it bothered her profusely. Her mom was in a rehab hospital where she was for over 3 weeks, lost over 10 pounds, and literally had to be accompanied by someone for all the activities of daily living, like toileting, etc. After receiving a medical discharge in 2001, Sheila earned her BS in mechanical engineering in '05 from Missouri University of Science and Technology. She also holds a master's in biomedical engineering from St. Louis University. And she developed the concept for the upward mobility, something we'll talk about, in 2018 to help improve the quality of life in rehab centers. Her goal today is for people to start thinking of AI as a way to solve problems and a great tool at our disposal instead of fearing it. Are you there, ma'am? Are you there, Sheila?
Yes, Richard, thank you for that introduction.
You're very welcome. Where are you sitting this morning?
I'm in St. Charles, Missouri.
St. Charles. And so we talked a little bit, weather been nice, weather hasn't been nice.
So I just got back from visiting my parents in Arizona, and the weather when I left was rainy and horrible. And in Prescott, where my parents live, it was sunny and beautiful. Although they live in an independent living facility, my brother was there with his small children, and I was hiding Easter eggs and mistaken for a pervert in the trees. That was awesome. And then, I come back and the sun's shining and spring is in full bloom in St. Louis.
There you go. And you're ready to go. So what I want to talk about first is your story and your mom's story. Tell our listening audience, kind of remind them a little more detail of what took place. 97, you joined the Army, and then kind of what happened from there for your own story and own journey, and then we'll get to mom.
Okay, yeah. I was joined the Army in 1997. I left I left high school with a scholarship. That scholarship was tied to a GPA that I didn't maintain, and I ended up joining the military. Anyway, I deployed in 1998, and I was in a UN. After the generator fell on my foot, I was in a UN hospital, and I had a whole cadre of UN nurses to accompany me for all the activities of daily living, and I didn't like it. Right, I'm going to the bathroom. I want to do that by myself.
Right.
But I didn't have to wait. I just didn't like the fact that somebody was there all the time. They're waiting to serve me. There wasn't that many women, especially in maintenance,
right.
In the hospital then. So I get out and I complete my education, and I knew that for the majority of I worked for a lot of great companies, but for the majority of my career, it was automation and making physical tasks done by machines. And a lot of that included artificial intelligence, machine learning type of technology. So when my mom gets injured, right, and she's in that rehab hospital, my first inclination was just to burn it down. But it's like,
Burn down the rehab hospital?
yeah,
Were you
like
just,
because it wasn't nice, and I was like, well, why? Why are they doing this in this antiquated way? And I was at first, my thought was the healthcare workers in general were not, but there's just not enough of them. It's not that they're ill intentioned; it's just that
right,
there's not enough of them, and
right,
then it becomes I learned then that it was a systemic problem. It wasn't just like they were mean to my mom. My mom was
right.
like 110 pounds, so she went to 99, and I mean, for me, losing 10 pounds would probably be okay. But for, if you don't have 10 pounds to lose, it's a huge deal. And I watched as my mom had to wait to go to the bathroom and to be accompanied by the bathroom. And I was like, I know that there was a better way. Like, I use this analogy about the internet in 1998. I was more patient with it because that was the best we had.
Right.
But if I had to use the internet now, in 2025, like it was 1998 in dial-up, I would lose my mind because I know there's a better way. I experienced better things. So I sat there watching my mom struggle with things that I didn't think she needed to struggle with. And I knew that automation in this type of area could be achieved. So I was like, well, we could do this and make people better and more independent.
Before you get to that, I'm not sure if I told you, we talked a little bit, some of my own story, and I think I've told the listening audience this. So almost 10 years ago, we were doing some work in our house. I was given the job to clean out the attic above the second floor. Like a dummy, I'm doing it early on a Tuesday morning with nobody home. And like another dummy, myself, I got into an argument with the ladder and fell about 10 feet. So wound up breaking a femur. So when you talk about mobility, I get it. Emergency surgery, and then off to a rehab center. I was there for 10 days, but I understand that frustration. Understand, you know, you've been mobile and walking and doing things your whole life, and now you can't do those. When I got to the rehab center, I was in a wheelchair, and part of their task was to get me out of the wheelchair, get me on a walker so I could leave and go where I was going to go next, which turned out to be home. But I get that frustration when you don't really have control of your ability to walk. So, upward mobility. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about where this idea came from your injury, from your mom, and how that started and what it is.
Okay, the UPMO is what we're calling it, upward mobility. But it was definitely, I'm a problem solver by nature, and I sat there. I knew firsthand the importance of being independent in all those situations, but I didn't have the tool set then in 1998. But I definitely had the tool set in 2018, and it was more bothersome to me to see my little mama struggling in ways that I knew she didn't need to.
Right.
So that I sat, it's not like I one day figured out how to do this simply. It's not a simple thing, but it was like a year, and I figured it didn't take me a full year, but to figure it out. At first, my inclination was, I figured out this problem. I'll just go work for who's ever developing a product that solves this problem. And it was very frustrating at first to find out that nobody was working on this problem. Not everybody has the empathy that you would have. Like, I don't know. I have no idea, Richard, about the rehab you were in, but they look nice on the outside. But when you're there and you're
Yeah.
whatever, like, it's just different. And 30 years ago, you could tell by the smell. Now you can't really tell by the smell.
Yeah.
Then there was it's just one of those things that I think, well, there's got to be a better way. And that's where this came from. Essentially, I was like, it was easy for me to put myself in my mom's shoes as far as what she needed medically, but I don't have the like, I don't care if it's a dude taking me to the bathroom or if it's a woman. I don't want to be accompanied to the bathroom. I think for my mom, she didn't want to be accompanied first and foremost, but the limitations on who could provide help really mattered to her. They wouldn't matter to me. The ultimate problem was solving the automation part and making people more independent. And you're able to get better, Bill, but like Richard, it's one of those things where if somebody, I think you talk about this many times, is you think it's going to be like a week until your parents
Right.
or
Yep.
whatever is going to be better, but that's not
Yep.
always the case. So how do we learn how somebody's progressing and what that means for them forever? And whether what motion is good motion or what motion is troublesome and means a more indicative stay. And I think the upward mobility will allow people to understand their improvements and like how they move, if it's more stable, less stable, if it's deteriorating, if it's getting better, or if they're going to need more assistance going on. And the way that upward mobility works, like, is right now, if you're in a rehab hospital, I don't know if this was the way it worked for you, but please tell me if not. But you would select or press a button on a remote, like you turn on a TV, and a healthcare worker comes to this. You'd push a button, but instead of a healthcare worker, it would be the upward mobility, would just travel to you using LiDAR, but it's like a Roomba, right? Travel to you and then drop down a nylon strap where you have a harness that's fitted to you, like your biomechanics, your height, your weight, and when you attach your harness to the upward mobility strap and then put the harness on like a jacket and secure it, the upward mobility would know who you are, and what your needs are, what your concerns are, and then you would be able to move under your own power and conduct these activities of daily living like
Wow.
toileting independently. The healthcare worker would know your position and location at all times, but they're off doing the stuff they were trained to do. So, if obviously this isn't going to work for everybody, but it would help a lot of people and give
Sure.
people the health workers the bandwidth to do what's most important, so it wouldn't be a couple hours you're waiting. And then I think as we learn more about motion, like what's proper motion, how one person moves relative to the general population or as they age, we'll be able to apply that in different ways.
So if you could kind of draw our audience a picture of the UPMO device. I mean, you said like a Roomba. How big is this device? Is it on the floor? Just try to draw a picture if you can.
So the upward mobility device, like the device itself, is made to fit through a door in a rehab hospital. It's 42 inches wide and around the toilet. So toilets are pretty standardized. It can do that. The upward mobility can face either. There's not a front or a back facing to it. There's just so you pull it in over a toilet, you sit down and then you get up if you need help doing any of those things. Most people, just speaking off generalities, make it to the bathroom, but they have trouble getting off the toilet or off, and then getting back to their bed. So this would be there, but you'd move under your own power to build strength. We have our CMO is our chief medical officer is a therapist, right? So she's like, it's important that people do things for themselves if they can.
Right.
So the ability to enable that, but keep people safe is, I think, an ultimate goal for everybody. It's what I want for myself and my family, right?
As I've aged personally, I'll be 72 in a couple weeks, and I've talked about I have a spinal issue. So balance for me is different now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it's something that I think about a lot. Obviously, going back to in my own situation with the femur, like you were talking about, I really thought in a month or two I'd be fine. I'd be out there doing all the things I normally do and I would conduct life. It took me 8 months. And I was 60-ish when this happened. I wasn't 80, 85, 90 years old, and people not understanding that, okay, mom broke her hip and she's, well, I'll go out and help her for a couple days and she'll be okay. No, those couple days can be a couple weeks, a couple months, or even a couple years, and mom is still struggling. But the idea, I mean, even without an injury, as we age, the spinal issue I have, people have other issues, there's always that risk of a fall. I mean, is this something that can really reduce falls?
So if you're attached to the upward mobility, you wouldn't be allowed to fall, right? Like in the hospital setting, it's sometimes called an unplanned descent to the floor with or without injury. So you might have that unplanned, but you're not going to descend to the floor. Like it'll catch you. But that's part of the reason the harness will know your specific biometrics. Is it's like, okay, a 80-year-old woman doesn't get snapped up the same way I would get snapped up. When I was 20, it's different than it was now because a lot of things in my body changed since I was 20. But like, it's important that people don't fall ever. But as you age, there's this magic thing that happens when you fall.
Yeah.
People fear falling and they move less, and then they're more apt to fall when they step outside the things that they normally do. And you die like sooner because of the fall that happened.
Yeah.
You do less and you fall. And if you take away that fear, I don't know that you can take it away permanently, but you can take away a part of it by, okay, making sure people don't fall, but also that the corrective action doesn't hurt people as much as a fall. And I think like
go
a
ahead.
lot of people I was just going to make an analogy that like in seatbelts, right? Like people had to learn that you had to be able to move, or that because whiplash could be terrible if it pulled you back too fast. Anyway, sorry.
No, is this something people are so? I mean, I know with my own situation, you're watching TV at night, it's getting later in the night, you've been up all day, getting in and out of a chair can be a little more complex than it was 3, 4, 5, 6 hours ago because you're tired. Are you seeing this device used by people at home in situations like I'm talking about?
I think there's some miscommunication there. This device isn't meant to be used at home because
Got it.
homes is a very different, customizable. I lived in the city in like a 100-year-old house for a long time, for 17 years,
Yep.
and the door frames were 28 inches. In a hospital, they're standardized at 42 inches. There's nothing you could do to go through a door frame and around a toilet if your door frame is 28 inches apart.
No, I get it, and helping people understand where it's used and the use for it. I mean, something I've seen over the years, you've probably seen as well. I mean, accidents happen in rehab hospitals. People do fall. Other things happen. Is and there are lawsuits that float around against rehab hospitals for a lot of different reasons. Is this something that could help reduce some of those lawsuits?
Absolutely. I think right now every year there's $182 billion in medical lawsuits filed.
Whoa.
Yeah, nationwide it's a huge problem. And the majority of those lawsuits are about people who take themselves on self-assisted bathroom trips and they fall.
Yeah.
So they either injure the healthcare worker or they injure themselves and their family sues or places the lawsuit. But there is some like people who there's some lawsuits that are filed because a surgeon, God, I hate that I'm using a baseball analogy, but his batting average it's not his fault. But when I was doing a feasibility study, I guess, I talked to a lot of people standing up and sitting down, moving motion. And a woman had 2 healthcare workers with her, but she still fell the day she had her knee
Wow.
replaced.
Wow.
And she didn't know for a month whether she'd have to have her knee replacement replaced.
Wow.
And she didn't end up having to have it, but that's a lot of mental anguish.
Yeah.
So I think if it's your loved one or your like family, you're going to be more apt to take it personally than and conduct action. But I think my ultimate goal is right now the upward mobility, this mechanical device has this control system that's used on motion. It compares your motion, what you normally do, to a library of some number of people. But as we learn more about motion, we can use the same ability without the frame to say, okay, people are unstable getting off the toilet. Your mom is unstable at this time. If you sit in the TV or if you're tired later in the day, you sundown physically, then that can be accounted for. You can see that deterioration.
Now, one thing you talked about, and I want to emphasize as well, we're not picking on rehab hospitals. The reality is there was a shortage of workers. So I'm in this hospital almost 10 years, this rehab center almost 10 years ago. Was a shortage of workers then, of people that are providing the care. COVID comes. We're seeing across the senior care spectrum, in an assisted living, home care, in a rehab setting like this, they're having problems for a lot of different reasons that we can talk about on a different podcast, getting the appropriate workers in there. And kind of like you're saying, I've been that patient in a bed. You need to use the facilities. You've always gotten up. Now you want to get up, but you have to remind yourself this is probably not the best thing to do by myself based on the situation that I have. So having a device like that, yeah, it can reduce lawsuits, which are great, but it, as you said, not only hurt the patient, but potentially hurt the care worker or workers that are with the patient, and what's going to happen if it takes quite a while, which I saw in person, for a care worker to get to your room.
Just several things, Richard. Workman's compensation claims for is like $13 billion. If we could put a dent in that, it would be great. But also, it's like registered nurses have a lot of education, but they can only work with patients on average 12 years because they get injured.
Sure.
It's a really high, I don't know, injury rate for a profession.
Yeah.
And it's like how, besides the fact that healthcare workers have violence, I know that like when my mom was in that rehab hospital and I was just surly and mean, there's people who aren't just going to be surly and mean. They're going to react in a different way. And God, like a lot of nurses get punched and things like that. And that's not fair, but if we can enable people to live their best lives, most people want to help themselves.
Yeah,
Most people want to go to the bathroom by themselves.
I
So
agree.
it's,
I was one of them, and especially if it's the middle of the night, and maybe they are short staffed, and you're trying to get help, and you need to get up. No, I totally understand. In the few minutes we have left before we say goodbye, I want to just talk about AI. People probably have heard AI everywhere, and a lot of people probably are fearful of it. But I gotta believe that from a technology standpoint, there are many, many benefits. Can you talk about the benefits versus the fear?
so I think it's our human nature to just fear what we don't understand. And so much it's AI has become like a buzzword and people fear what they don't understand. And then when you scrub that a little bit and go under the surface of artificial intelligence and people learn that it's math, it's like a statistical analysis of everything. That freaks people out more, I think. And I have experienced that fear. Like people hear AI and they think like an apocalyptic event, like the Terminator thinking for itself and coming back and killing everybody. And there's a lot of fear behind people losing their jobs and people
Yep.
because of artificial intelligence. And those are real, but it's like there's a falling thing that where you focus, that's where you're going to end up. And if you totally look at the floor, you're going to end up hitting the floor. And I think if we just see the potential of what we could do with artificial intelligence and how it could help, yes, it will take some jobs, but people need to not fear it. As a society, we need to not fear it.
I totally agree. And folks, I talk about this all the time as we get ready to wrap up. I mean, we are where we are. Oldest boomers that I'm smack in the middle of are turning 80. We have over 100 million people 50 and older. We're an aging nation. Our parents had a lot of fun after World War II, and now that's the reality that we are getting older. More people are going to fall. More people are going to have injuries. More people are going to wind up in a rehab situation like Sheila's talking about. This is reality. I encourage you folks, look into all this. Sheila's about to give some contact information in a minute. Go to A Plan to Age, our new national foundation. My contact information is within it. We really need to get ahead of aging and the fact, as I talk about, realistically 95% of us are going to need care at some point. It could be a few hours, it could be a few years, or something in between. Understand what's out there. Understand what it's like to go through an injury. You know, God forbid, we don't want that happening to somebody, but it's reality. And the better prepared we can get when something happens to loved ones around us, the better position we're in. What Sheila's doing is fantastic. What information do you want to put out there? Email, website, phone number, so people can connect with you?
I wrote a book called Is This Seat for Me? And I have the website domain, isthisseatforme.com. And if you go to that website, you get a chapter, either audio or ebook, not the Dead Tree version, because obviously it's on, but you have the opportunity there to put your email down and I'll email you. And I won't spam you. Just
No, very, very cool. And again, as I say all the time, folks, this is a great episode, a lot of wonderful information. Please share it with those folks around you. You know, what we're trying to do through this podcast is bring a lot of information about some great subjects like this to a lot of people. And we can utilize your help too by talking to your friends, talking to folks at the church, talking to colleagues you work with, and talking about some of the episodes that you're hearing in Caring in America, and sharing those episodes. So as we get ready to say goodbye, Sheila, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on this morning. And folks, as I always say, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day.